So here's part two of our lecture about using research and reason in education. So the first concept we want to talk about is peer review. The peer review process is evident in all professional career fields and is used to inform decision making. This is the first place that teachers should look for when they're looking for evidence of teaching practices that are validated by research. It's very easy to determine if research has been peer reviewed and published as a way to determine credibility. As a teacher, you should be thinking, have the findings supported in this teaching method or this teaching theory been published in a recognized journal that uses a peer review procedure process? So as you become more familiar with your field of education and in hopefully some of your upper level courses, you'll be having to read articles that come from publications that are using a peer review process. And so those are going to be different for each field, but it doesn't matter if you're in medicine or in architecture, like we already talked about, but also even in education, it can get very specific. Like there are journals about teaching with using technology. There are journals about teaching elementary, early childhood, special education, upper, it's national councils of the teachers of English for high schoolers and mathematics and so on. So depending on your area, you'll want to become familiar with the journals that publish papers about that topic. And then you're going to look to see if they use a peer review process. Whenever you want to submit a paper to a journal, so let's say me, I'm a college professor and I'm supposed to be doing research and submitting it for publication. And if you go online and you search my name, you should be able to find some papers that I've written. And so whenever I've submitted a paper, I have to go through this peer review process. So I pick a journal. Let's say I'm going to go with the Reading Teacher. That's a journal. I'm going to submit a paper to that journal. I'm the author on that paper, or maybe I wrote it with somebody else. There's an editor for that journal. Now, the editor for the journal is considered the author's peer in the sense that journal editors are people with similar backgrounds as to the people writing for the article. So they are licensed in the same way, or they're educated to the same extent, so that they are have a similar understanding of this field. The editor reads the paper for the first time and then decides whether or not to send it on for a peer review process. So that's the first level of peer review, is the editor says yes or no. Now, the editor may read a paper and think right away, there's no scientific research based on this, or this person has nothing to base it on. They're just kind of coming up with an idea. And they may go ahead and say right away, no, we're not going to publish your paper. But if the editor sees something that's worthwhile and valuable and based on the research process, the editor will send it out. The editor then sends the paper to 2 or 5 other reviewers in that field who have an extensive history of work in that area. Just realized I never went all the way into presentation mode. And so what happens is that, the editor's going to email it to at least 2, probably 3 or 4 other people who are professional in that area. So sometimes I could be a reviewer. I could receive someone's paper from an editor and I could read it and analyze it. When the editor sends it, there's like a checklist that you have to follow to see are they using the research process? Did they have participants? Did they explain their theory? Did they follow proper procedures? And then you can send it back to the editor. Now, after everyone returns the paper, the editor looks over what everyone who read it says about the paper and then makes a collective decision based on the feedback to either accept the paper as it is, ask for revisions from the author to fix things that are a problem, or to just say, no, you know what? There are too many problems with your paper. We're going to reject it. Now, this process, I wrote 2 to 4 months. Honestly, it can take 6 months or longer for the peer review process from the time that I submit a paper to the time that I hear back on whether or not it's going to be published in the journal. Now, some theories, for example, whole language might survive for a while, even without the lack of peer review. Now, what are they looking for in this peer review process? Like when I write a paper, I have to say this is the basic stuff about what you learned when you did a science fair project, right? Do you have a hypothesis? Did you collect data? Did you analyze the data properly using a well-known analyzation method? Did you look at the data? Do the results from your study actually inform your findings? That's the kind of stuff they're looking for. Unfortunately, a lot of classroom teachers don't bother reading scientific journals or publications about reading instruction. And some teachers have not been taught that they should even question or be concerned or even think about what's happening. But doesn't it seem logical that if you're going to devote your entire life to teaching kids how to read, that it would be worth the time and effort to read from a peer-reviewed journal? Now, what's a big deal about this is because it takes so long. So as a professional, if I want to go through the peer review process and I got to wait 6 months or so, I have to really wait when I could just turn around and blog my ideas out and then hope that it gets shared on social media and catches on and becomes trendy. So we just want to make sure that we are looking at what the journals say about our ideas for curriculum and instruction in the classroom. That was the first one. Oh, I guess I got a couple more comments. So how do you know if the journal uses peer review? Well, in every issue, you can look at the editorial policy, or you can always just ask at the library. A librarian's job is to help answer these kinds of questions for you. And so ask your librarian to help you figure that out. Now, not all information in a peer-reviewed journal is going to be correct, but what you can assure yourself is that at least it has undergone this peer scrutiny process. That means other people have read what is written and have agreed that it should be published and put out there in the world. Failure of a method or a theory to undergo the peer review process is a strong indication that you should be skeptical of it, because it means that the author just wanted to get it out there quickly and they weren't as concerned about getting feedback from other people to have this collective agreement that, yeah, this sounds good, this sounds right. All right, so now let's talk about replication. Replication is the second way that science uses this idea to make a research-based conclusion shared with public. A research finding should be presented to other researchers in a way that enables them to conduct the same experiment and obtain the same results. When the same findings occur, the experiment has been replicated. So, what does this mean? For example, I recently did a study where I spent a whole year in a kindergarten classroom while I looked to see if kids use technology during writing instruction or to write digital journals. I am publishing a paper about that. But in my paper, I have explained everything from the type of classroom to the teacher to the kind of students to here's what he did and here's what they did, and to such an extent that if another teacher wanted to say I wonder if that would work in my kindergarten classroom, they can do the exact same thing that I did in my study in their classroom and then see if they get the same findings that I got from my study. So I've presented the information in a way that I'm very transparent and very clear. And this is what you want out of a paper that is published in a journal. Conclusions about teaching practices should not exist just in the mind of an individual. Okay, so someone shouldn't just be like, oh yeah, well, this is how you do it, but I'm the only one who can know about it because I want to make money off of this. If they're not willing to be transparent and explain their process, then it's probably just a money-making scam instead of just actually wanting to be rooted in research that adds to this field of knowledge base so that teachers can make good decisions. Their conclusions should then be submitted for criticism and verification. So again, for criticism, review from peers, and verification, replication. So what I hope is that if someone reads my paper and then they try to do the same study and then they find out that they got similar results or if they got different results, then I hope they write a paper that then gets submitted so that other people can start reading it. And after so many times of, excuse me, of this idea being used over and over, then we know that it's a good method to use in the classroom. This is what happens in medicine. They do one clinical trial and then they get results. Then they do another clinical trial and they get results. And over time, as more and more patients get positive results from medication, then we say this is safe and effective to use for this treatment. So, how do you know about replication? You want to ask where this theory or the data or the findings have been published. And a lot of times this will stop your conversation because the person that's trying to get you to use this teaching method may not have a response to that. Because really, they're just trying to share their opinion about a teaching method. So then if they say, yes, here's where you can find out more information. And it can't just be a blog or something they read on Facebook. You're looking for something that's been published through that peer review process. Then you want to check out the publication to actually determine if the peer review is there. Then you want to determine if the findings have ever been replicated by researchers. Now, maybe it hasn't because maybe it's new. But if it is, then that's something you might want to even be interested in because maybe you can conduct a study in your own classroom to find out if the teaching method is effective or not.